Monster Hunter has always had a tradition of change, expanding upon tradition, never forgetting the past, but always striving forward. This idea can range from the smallest of changes within a monster to the most drastic of new mechanics, ideas, and more. Monster Hunter is an ever-evolving series, and so I thought that before Monster Hunter takes this next step with Iceborne, that I would look back on all the changes that world brought in terms of the monsters. Particularly, what do I think of them? What are my thoughts on each one of them, and where exactly would I rank them? But before we get started, I must clarify a few things. First and foremost, no Iceborne monsters. I think this is pretty obvious to explain, so just know and remember that I am only taking into consideration the roster pre-Iceborne. When Iceborne does come out, then I may perhaps make another video like this based on the monsters in the expansion. Second, this compilation will take into consideration many various factors, but most important of all will be the battle and how fun it is. In my point of view, you could have the coolest monster potential and ideas ever, make it the most amazing thing ever, but if the fight against it isn't fun, then what's the point of even facing it again and again? Third and finally, this is all of course my opinion, and is not based on what the best monsters ever are, or whatever the hell that means anymore. This of course means that the explanations I give will be very subjective, and I know not everyone will agree with them. So please, try not to throw a fight in the comment section over what I and others may say. Rather, try and create discussion and debate around it. I'm all ears for some friendly conversations after all. With all the formalities out of the way, let's dive headfirst into the new world, seeing all that there is to offer. The stereotypical beginning level monster that is as easy as cake to defeat. It isn't challenging or whatever, but there is something so fun about how fast and mercilessly you can kill it. Plus, those expressions he can make though. Not to mention, he oddly stole the show when the game's announcement trailer came out, with memes and images being based off of him, his gluttonous diet, and him being a cousin to the fat boy himself. Greatest Jagras, if taken into account, also makes Jagras noticeable, with quite a big difficulty jump between the two. And of course, it's also hilarious to just see a giant Jagras of all things kick the shit out of you. Banana hair out of 10. Another beginning level monster, and wow, is he, interesting to say the least. The colors look vibrant and beautiful. Its design uses the Kut-Ku model while taking a twist on it, and its many inspirations all make it stand out. It also approaches the usual poison monster a bit differently, by allowing the poison to take different visual effects based on the kind of food Pukei ate. And the effects weren't just visual, but also small incremental changes to a poison as well and how he dealt it. In the original draft of this video, I was just going to put Pukei in the good tier, but after fighting it again and letting him actually do his mechanic, I was convinced he needs to be in great. He has so many wonderful intricacies to him that I never knew about, like how if he has the smoke puff, then he can make his poison last for longer in the field, like a cloud in the traditional Monster Hunter games. Or how about if he has a scatter nut, that allows him access to the Rathian triple fireball and even the Rathalos fireball into air move. And now I've finally seen what that tail move looks like, and it is just fantastic. Unfortunately, it only happens if Pukei eats another berry if he already has one stockpiled, and due to how easily the tail comes off, basically never happens. Which is really sad. A monster this complex and intricate placed so early on in the game, to the point that people would just blast by him without even knowing such moves even exist. I would love it if in Iceborne they buff him to last longer, or just make it harder to knock him out of his mechanics or cut off his parts, but with all that said, he is still great. This has to be one of the most mishmash monsters I have ever seen in all of Monster Hunter, and I love it. Normally, with this many inspirations and things it is based off of, you'd think that it would look cluttered, like a mess. Yet the Tobi-Kadachi manages to incorporate all these mechanics into the design perfectly, giving enough space for each feature to shine in its own right, and making such a weird monster in a series already filled with weirdos. It is a flying squirrel monster with a snake head capable of gathering static electricity and making its hair stand on end, is able to glide in the air and do acrobatic flips and tricks, as well as being based off of a taser! Aside from that, the design and coloration is top notch, and its battle is pretty fun, with the hunter always having to keep an eye on where he is and what he is doing. And don't even get me started on that tail flip. It is so cool looking and has enough power and flair built into its buildup that it delivers in deadly death-dealing potential. I mean, look at how fervent-tempered Toby with how that can turn out. Practically a one-shot, if not more than half health, even with endgame armors. Yikes. Overall, a great monster show the players with the kitty gloves are coming off. So, anyone who has been around for a while may know how I feel about this monster, and more specifically, my initial reactions to it in world. It's tricky to explain, but here we go. I don't really like this monster. Most of the others in the Brute Wyvern category stand out so much and are fan favorites within the community, each having something unique about them that makes them distinct. Brachydios' warhead design, Glavnus' greatsword tail, Boros being a pretty ballerina, Joe being the angry pickle he is, and even Barroth, whose movements are based off of construction machines, while being basic, all stand out. Then we get to Anjanath and... what is this design? Okay. Let me set the stage for you. You are watching the reveal trailer for World, looking at all the amazing details in the environment, all the changes made, and it amazes you. Alright? You may not know what it is yet, but it excites you, intrigues you. Then, the hunter puts on some kind of moss blanket and sneaks up on a T-Rex-like monster. It looks imposing, especially from the front view. What with its pink skin, feathers and fur, and the vulture jaw or mouth design all culminating together into something that feels interesting. It was one of the only times throughout the franchise where I felt such a real-world influence on a monster, and I was intrigued to see what it could do. Then it pulls out its nose from nowhere and every feeling of intimidation you felt just goes out the window. It looks so goofy. You had this cool, unique base design going strong, and then the nose just pops out and ruins it. How are you supposed to take something like this with a feature like that seriously? You can't. That's the answer. And then the sails come out and... it's just ruined. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand what they were going for and where these design inspirations come from. I do like dinosaurs after all. However, I don't see the point in making these design choices if they don't serve a greater purpose in the fight, like making it more fun. The nose is the smallest offender of this, because for as silly as it looks, it does serve a purpose in laying tracks and even detecting your scent. But then what about the sails? What do they do? Are they just there because the developers need more indication of rage mode even more than the endless screaming of this monster and the fire coming out of its snout? If anything, the design looks like an absolute mess with all the details showing. It looks like they went to Photoshop and just stuck a trumpet and dragon wings onto a fur dinosaur and then calling it a day. It looks so lazy and cluttered in the design, just no cohesion whatsoever. Where do they pop out from? Where do they come from? How could something that big just vanish into thin air? Yet, people are completely fine with this and instead shit on Frontier, creating blanket statements and false claims that people just take for granted because they can't be bothered to do some research and give it a chance, when in reality, Frontier has so much good going for it and... Anyways, even ignoring all that, even ignoring the design and my problems with it, the fight with it really isn't anything special. I do like how fire comes out of its nose like that, but everything else I could do without. The what feels like infinite chain attacks he can do, the flinching caused by the fire around his snout, his bites, his tail whips, his jumps, his hip checks, and dear lord, the hitboxes and roaring. And that's not even ignoring the fact that he stole the fire throat mechanic from Glavenus. It's a monster that felt like it puts so much focus on everything else in its ecology and... here we go with that word again. Realism, or pseudo-realism, that the fight is just ultimately left lacking. In summary, Anjanath is the rage gaming of monster monsters. The OG flagship, the monster that just won't die, and the monster we will have to keep on fighting, ladies and gentlemen, it's Rathalos. You know, as if it's a surprise he's even in this game at all. What a shocker. In terms of returning monsters though, Rathalos actually has quite a bit changed about it. Compared to older games, it can fight in the air much smoother, even when transitioning between land and sky, has a ton more moves and tricks, and thanks to the environment effects and all the improvements, is much more bearable to fight. Rathalos has always been an easy peasy monster if you just packed flash bombs. Oh, excuse me, flash pods. But it's good to know that Rathalos has finally been given some major improvements in counters to him. Though I'm hesitant to call him a great monster or even good, as well, he still has all the good old and same old Rathalos tricks and annoyances from previous games, plus some more in this game. Not having flash pods and an insect glaive in the party can make it difficult with how much he flies and swoops, leading to a high likelihood of stun, poison, fire, roar, and wind combos. In short, he's a pushover if you just exploit every single one of his weaknesses. But if you don't, then be prepared. Azure works a lot like the already established Rathalos, but is a lot more, well, tricky. He can be just as big of a chump as Rathalos, provided you kill him quickly and are able to get him on the ground, but the big problems start when he's in the air. Aside from the previous Rathalos annoyances, Azure amps up quite a few notches by allowing him to combo much easier in the air, as well as giving him quite a few new tricks and moves. Trying to tackle him in the air without flash pods or insect glaive might as well be a death wish due to the amount of time he will spend in the air, the absolute never-ending feeling of his combos. Points at which normal Rathalos would end his combo and finally land on the ground are instead more points where Azure can continue and catch people off guard, not to mention the range on some of his attacks, the frequency of them, the flinching, the damage, and the fire and the poison of his attacks. All within a short span of time can easily lead to frustration with how often you could be hit. Combine all that and more with the previous annoyances of Rathalos, and you have a one-way ticket to Stunlock City. And let me tell you, nobody like Stunlock City. The best monster in the entire game. No joke. Literally, the absolute best monster in the game. Its quirky behavior and attitude, the unique design that gives a refreshing twist on the stereotypical drone design we've all seen before, how it acts both inside and out of battle, and just everything about this monster is appealing. Now granted, I do have a soft spot for this monster, as in the Wildspire Waste trailer, it was the monster to make me kind of look back on World and say, oh yeah, that actually looks really interesting and cool, compared to the initial World reveal trailer, which, in my honest and humble opinion, was really, really terrible in comparison to the other trailers. But anyways, getting back on topic, and ignoring all that, this monster is still fantastic, and it is just awesome. It feels like Anjanath in terms of an ecology-focused monster, but not butchered. Like for instance, I love how you can see it pick up herbivore and or wyvern eggs and crack them open to eat the yolk that is inside. I love how it can pick up an impervious, unbreakable rock and use it against you to great effect. both offensively and defensively, forcing hunters to try and figure out how to disarm him. And I love the sounds he makes, and the quirky attitude, and the music, and how fast-paced the fight feels, despite being early game. And oh dear lord, the Crystal Kulu given in the Final Fantasy crossover. That kicked so many people's asses long after endgame monsters like Kulve had been out, and all the buffs and changes they made to it created one hell of a challenge from what was once a Jaggy level monster. Seriously, if that jump didn't one-shot you, it would surely stun and leave you wide open. The only thing I could complain about the Crystal Kulu by us taking into account is that it is only fought once. You can't go back to face him. I mean, seriously, come on, a missed opportunity, Capcom. I know Behemoth was the center and the focus of the Final Fantasy crossover, but hopes and memes can be dreams, damn it! All means put aside, though, this is easily the best monster in the game, and an absolute favorite of mine. I am quite honestly surprised and amazed by how much they did for a simple Jaggy level monster. So I'll say it once, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it more, forever indefinite into the future, but Kulu's Vault! Jyuratodus honestly isn't anything special. On the one hand, I am still very salty that this got in instead of my boy Laggy. Yet on the other hand, I cannot deny that Jyura is the best Piscine wyvern in the main series, hands down. That is until the Iceborne beta, in which case, Jyuratodus easily takes that cake and runs with it. Which really isn't difficult to determine, seeing as how your competition consists of Plesioth, Lavasioth, and Cephadro. What a great and hard competition. I will also say that the fight with him isn't that bad, with a lot of fluid animations and attacks consisting of him using water and swimming, as well as the Jaws-like feel this fight sort of gives off. Plus, like Barroth, it is mud armor to break off, so that's fun. It's just that there really isn't a lot of spectacle in this fight. Despite feeling fluid and smooth, a lot of the attacks feel generic and kinda bland, aside from the Jaws dive. It really isn't a lot to keep the players interested or engaged in the hunt aside from, again, the Jaws dive attack. The murky water can also make his fight feel slower than usual, as without a good skill or piece of equipment, you'll be spending most of the battle in the water being slowed down. Though, on a more positive note, it is a nice detail that you can actually use the mud he spits out as land once it hardens. His armor also looks great from the design perspective, though it's a shame that Jyura is the only water monster in the game thus far. Overall, a higher tier, middle-of-the-road monster, and best Piscine wyvern in the main series thus far. A tri-classic and a favorite of mine when it comes to the 3rd gen base roster. Barroth is a pretty good monster to start settling people into the more difficult monsters up ahead. Many of his attacks are pretty basic for a monster like him, but they do a good job of dealing sufficient damage if the player isn't aware. I do really like the new addition of the whistle when Barroth is doing his charge attack. It is a great piece of detail that not only calls back to its inspirations, but also serves a gameplay purpose with warning the player of something dangerous coming up. On a more negative note, however, I don't exactly like how the mud looks on him now. Yeah, sure, it's mud. It's not exactly the most colorful thing ever. It's just that compared to the previous games and the looks it had for that, it just looks less noticeable and more drab in coloration than previous games. Not to mention, it doesn't feel as deadly as before. Whereas previously mud would be frequently shaken off of him, you'll only see about 1 or 2 whenever he does that in this game, maybe even less depending on how many parts you've broken off of him and if he even has any mud left. Now, thing is, this all still isn't enough to make Barroth bad to me, hell no. I still like the Mud Puppy for sure. But all these changes are noticeable, especially when considering if you used to fight old gen Barroth a lot in the old games. Still, I like him a lot. He's a pretty good monster for settling people into the harder parts of the game coming up, and he provides a good challenge as well as armor for people to bounce off of. So, yeah, rock on, Mud Puppy. Rathian ever since Tri has been a favorite monster of mine. Her armor, if I can recall correctly, was one of the first I made, much less one that wasn't based off of a Let's Play or guide that I had seen. And her fight had provided me a decent challenge and even puzzle in terms of how to deal with the tail. And, well, that all still applies in World. I still do like her. As the land counterpart to Rathalos, Rathian is a lot more bearable and up close in terms of fine style, preferring to fight you with fireballs, charges, bites, and her trademark tail flip. That attack, even now, is quite deadly, and trust me, you don't want to be hit by that, as it inflicts the hunter with poison, and it also comes packing a good chance of inflicting stun. Luckily though, unlike Rathalos, there is a huge tail when she is about to do it, and it isn't like you're stunned and can't do anything whenever she does do it. And you want to know the best change in addition to Rathian in this game? Finally, after 4 generations worth of games and appearances, her tail can no longer inflict poison if it is cut off. I honestly have no clue why it took this long to make such a small change like that, but hey, I'm not complaining! Now granted, I can see how the tail flip and charging can be annoying to some people, but as long as you respect the Queen of the Land and know how to properly treat her in advance, then it will all go hopefully smooth. And I say hopefully because there's no telling what her dick of a husband may do. Everything I already said about Rathian applies to Pink, though she has some new tricks up her sleeve. For starters, her bite attack now has a follow-up. Her body is more armored than usual, not to the ludicrous levels of Goldian, but still noticeable. Though if you have any weapons with sharpness above blue, then you should be good, provided you don't hit an extra hard point on her body like her tail, for instance. And finally, Pink has a new variation of a tailspin in the form of the cartwheel, and from what I've seen, can spin more often in the air. It isn't too much to handle, it's still usual Rathian affairs, though be careful about the cartwheel and the potential of bouncing. That shit can get you caught into quite the hairy situation, not just for this monster, but any monster. Still though, it's the same old Rathian that I know in the end, so same ranking stands. I think I'm honestly insane for being one of those people who don't hate Diablos. True, he has a habit of roaring a lot, being brutal, and going into rage mode from what feels like the moment you attack him once, but he's always provided an adrenaline rush that puckers my butt up to its max, lest I get impaled with those, massive horns. And suffice to say, Diablos in this game was quite fun. He's got the usual tricks as always, though he has also received some tweaks to his overall fight, such as digging path, attacks, rage, and overall the amount of times he charges. And even if he does charge, the prep and wind up beforehand lets you always know what is next. And I especially love Diablos' interaction with the environment, getting its horn stuck in the pillars, disappearing and then jumping out of the sand falls within its lair, and even using Annoyance above to make him appear and create a quicksand pool down to his lair, which can especially be helpful with monsters like Barroth and Rathian. I won't deny, however, how brutal he can be, especially for newcomers, but Diablos always provides me the adrenaline necessary for a hunt such as his, and World definitely tweaked him overall to be even better. Is this Black Diablos? Or Diablos Black? All jokes aside, not much different between the two generally, though Black is definitely the more aggressive one of the two. If you think Diablos was bad before, well then, wait till she's quite literally on her period. Besides just being overall more aggressive and faster, Black does have 2 new tricks with it. The burrow launch and an aiming charge attack in which you'll gear up like a bull aiming towards a player, a few seconds later charging after you with startling speed. Trust me, it is really scary to be in front of its attack and barely avoid it, even more so when you get hit by it and are inflicted with stun. I don't know about you guys, but I can definitely feel the tension tonight being on point. Her point. A monster within the grand scheme of the game that I honestly tend to forget sometimes. though his main attribute and some of the images and talks made from him definitely save it from being in the totally forgotten bin. He's got moves similar to Kulu, but has some differences such as his leg kick, running jumps, and the main star of his show, his camera. But besides those differences and a interesting design, especially with the antenna, he doesn't have a lot more going for him, much less complex aspects about him. Which is perfectly fine, seeing as how he's the Jaggy level monster of the Coral Highlands. It's just kind of disappointing considering what other Jaggy level monsters have done. But hey, at least we'll all remember him as the paparazzi of monster, whether we want him to be there or not. Similar to that of Tobi-Kadachi, I find Paolumu a fascinating monster to look at. The multiple inspirations, the design, as well as the mechanics are intriguing to say the least, and just shows the amount of effort and detail that goes into designing a monster. Unlike Tobi-Kadachi, however, I don't feel like all of these details were fully incorporated as well as they could have. For the most part, Paolumu acts very similarly to a Kutku style of monster, practically using many of the same moves as it, repeatedly tail whipping, charging ahead, bird kicking, all of that and maybe a bit more takes up a good chunk of this battle, leaving it feel very stale for a monster at this point in the game, when considering you just fought Zorah Magdaros and are now in a new area. Now of course, there is its main mechanic where after taking enough puffs of air, it will inflate itself like a hot air balloon. Unlike other flying monsters, however, the ones who maybe might abuse such a mechanic, Rathalos! Pao is delegated to a timer in terms of how long he can stay inflated for. So there is no need worrying on if he will be able to abuse the hell out of his flying mode and just fly everywhere. So that's good. There is, however, the issue of the attacks he can do well in this mode. The light tail slam isn't all that much of a pain, but it's the other two where things can get hairy. A wind spewing move that, while doesn't create a tornado like Kush, can still stun and flinch the hunter, leaving them wide open to easy pickings, and the other, and more dire of the two, the pounce. This fucking pounce. This move is fast and hits very hard. Not only that, but for certain people and perhaps first timers, it can be hard to track where Pao intends to go, before it inevitably slams into them. And like Tobi-Kadachi's move has a high potential of inflicting stun, and in the case of a tempered version, practically being a one-shot just like him. And there's also that around the world attack it has, but it is really easy to avoid and see coming due to the amount of time it takes for a monster to actually attack. It's honestly sad that a monster with this much potential and, dare I say the word, cute factor behind it is ultimately left lackluster and bland a majority of the fight, while the times when it does get to do its main gimmick that makes it stand out can turn out to be quite annoying for people. Good ideas, I'll say, but mediocre execution. Meh. I remember when World first came out and watching a stream of Ryan fighting against the Legiana, and him saying how it was the better Rathalos. I took this with an inch of curiosity as, while Rathalos isn't all that great or even good in this game, I wanted to see if the claims he was making was true. You know, friendly competition, banter, and teasing and all that. I mean, hey, I do that all the time to him. Needless to say that when I did get to Legiana, that, yeah, it really is that good. It's got such a gorgeous, beautiful flying wyvern design with vibrant colors and patterns. Not to mention its fluid movements and attacks make it so much more noticeable and different than many other flying wyverns. Plus, the fact that a flying wyvern is using ice out of all elements makes it really cool. Fighting the Legiana is an absolute joy, especially with the insect glaive and matching its flying capabilities with that of the French. And its armor, again, a very solid design, looking like that of a Power Rangers or Super Sentai character, which just makes me want to fight this thing more and more and have even more fun with it. The essence of grace and beauty certainly lives up to its reputation. The Chad Uragaan. Instead of being covered in ore and metal, Ratto is covered in tar and bones. Whereas Uragaan is metal, Ratto is death metal! Not to mention, Thanks to being covered in bones, it has better traction while rolling and, unlike its cousin, is actually able to stop in the middle of rolling and turn the other direction. I won't lie, this freaks me out occasionally when I try and predict where he's going to go, only for him to stop and turn around in my direction. Gotta be quick on the draw with that. And if anybody needs more evidence as to why Rado is the better Uragaan, let me ask a question. Can Uragaan spin like a Beyblade? No? Exactly. I honestly forgot this monster even existed in the game. I keep forgetting he is in the game at all, because Great Girros is just that forgettable. Now, I don't have a problem with the design. Quite like it, actually, for being a different take on a famed wyvern. What isn't so good, however, is how it wanted to stand out. The whole gimmick with Girros is that it can call upon its pack and issue specific commands to attack and even neutralize hunters with. Problem is, a majority of the time when he does issue a command, it either A, doesn't work because the Girros are all dead or not in the vicinity of the command, or B, it just doesn't work. What is this? Monster World or Fallout 76? And it is really sad because aside from that main selling point of him, nothing else stands out besides maybe his body roll. Hell, even Great Jaggy, Baggy, and Roggy all did better at the whole pack mechanic than Girros. Just look at how the Jaggy are jumping around the entire place so happily, making the fight feel really crowded and closed in, while showing off a burst of personality with the Jaggies. And you wanna know what's especially set about this monster in comparison to the Jaggies, Baggies, and Roggies? It's the fact that the paralysis factor of this monster is practically relegated to its minions. Yes, you heard that right. Even if Girros bites you and you hear that sound effect, you won't get paralyzed. It's the minions that do it. Can't this thing paralyze Rado in one bite? What the hell? According to the wiki, there is a paralysis attack it has in the form of a spit, yet in a situation like that of Pukei but worse, I rarely, if never, see it. And again, like our friend Pukei but even worse, damaging the hood just outright destroys the ability for it to call for backup. So here we have a monster that has a main mechanic, but sometimes it doesn't work, has a status that can be seen working, only for it to not work on you, and a way to easily break and destroy the only interesting about this monster. For fuck's sake, even the Aggies are able to do their shit, both in status and in mechanics and in pack, better than this. And they're from the 3rd gen! The only outstanding thing about Girros, on a different note, is the armor, and it looks so good! It is a literal Bloodborne Plague Doctor armor. This may just be one of the coolest armors I have seen in all of Monster in terms of just fashion. I need to get it! Then you just look at it and see the skills on it and it absolutely sucks. I mean, really? Palico Rally? Of all things to put on this thing, Palico Rally and Paralysis Resistance for one paralysis monster in the entire game. And on a more recent note, fuck man, that G-Rank armor is sick! That is tearing me! That hood is tearing me! I need it! So please, Capcom, for the love of Kulu, please, either just make the armor worthwhile to get in terms of skills, or just allow us the capability to make any armor a layered armor, because otherwise, there just isn't anything special about this monster. I remember a long time ago watching the Ron Vale trailer when it first came out. Yeah, I know, that long ago, like about 2017 or 2018. And seeing a comment that made a comparison between Odo and Rajang. This didn't really sit well with me. It looked like such a cool and fun monster, and the last thing I would want is for it to be like Rajang, whom I absolutely despise. Cut to me playing the game months later, and all my worries are alleviated. Odo delivers the perfect fight that I was looking forward to from such a monster. Fast-paced, intense, blood-pumping, yet providing a fair and balanced challenge to the player. It can be very tricky to track Odo and see what he's doing, but you can easily screw him over with his dives, bites, and lunges towards you. Not to mention, if you are inflicted with bleeding, then it can become complicated to try and avoid him, all the while trying to cure bleeding and not take damage. Combine that all together into one monster and he can honestly overwhelm you if you aren't careful and aware. But, despite the danger, there's something so visceral about breaking its parts and claws as you trip him up more and more, becoming faster, more violent and aggressive just like Odo. It is a fight where you absolutely need to stay on your toes and be quick, be reactive, and I love that kind of approach. This is the kind of boss battle that I love in games, and the music feels absolutely designed for Odo in his fight, adding to the experience even more so. Odo truly is a good boy, and is one of my favorite fights in the entire game, and may just be up there in the top 10 for me in all of Monster. Who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? Yes you are. Yes you are. How? How could I possibly hate this absolute unit? Like, legit. This is one of the most adorable creatures I have ever seen in any medium. It's a chunky, lovable boy that eats rocks and ores and makes whale sounds for some reason. Why does he make whale sounds? I have no clue, but I don't care because it's cute. Its smile alone is enough to calm and tame even the most violent of hunters. And its attitude and ecological behavior is just I need it! But, however, if you dare attempt to hunt him, be prepared for a world of hurt, as Dodo surprisingly hurts quite a bit on many of his attacks, and is even quite fast for a monster like him. Be careful especially for the more shots he does. Those can reach quite a long distance, perhaps even across an entire area, and deal a lot of damage to you along with the possibility of blast and blast proc. Aside from that, his other attacks can also be quite powerful and have a chance to inflict blast. That charge especially is a great way for him to cover ground, all the while making it dangerous to approach him. I'm actually kind of amazed at the fact of Capcom making beginning level area monsters like Dodo actually pretty challenging. But why would you even want to challenge this thing when it is just so damn cute? Now, if only we can get a Dodogama costume in the Iceborne expansion. Please! Now look, I'm all for third generation representation and bringing back some of the favorites, but why Uragaan? Granted, I guess it makes sense, seeing how Rado is in the game already, and because we all need our obligatory lance and guard armor. But it kind of confuses me when considering all the other third generation monsters that could come back. Getting off that little tangent, Ura is weird. He's still the same old Ura that many people remember, with his annoying gas, sonic rolling, and chin slams, but to add on top of that, he now has another way of scattering those irritating rock bombs all over the place. And it's from something he likes to do a lot in the fight: rolling. If he decides to just keep rolling, then you will have bombs everywhere around you, which can be a real pain when trying to avoid such a big monster, what with how these bombs can explode after a short amount of time, and how the bombs can practically become invisible due to their small size and color. It may not seem that hard to find, but try keeping track of the bombs while in the lower levels of the Elder's Recess, all while trying to keep in mind the lava geysers, Uragaan and what he's doing, and if there just so happens to be any other monster in the area. It gets really annoying. Not only that, but practically any tail-swinging move can cause him to launch even more explosive rocks, leading the area to become even more claustrophobic. Oh, but wait, there's more! If he decides to go into an area with these edges or ramps, particularly the slope in his nest area, then he can quite literally steal from Rado. Yes, you heard that right. Remember how Rado can stop at his tracks and U-turn, catching people off guard? Well, when he is in one of these two areas and begins to ramp off the walls, he pulls a Rado. What? Really? It feels like they were trying to replicate the iconic Sonic Hill attack from the third generation, but worse. Partially because there was a sort of build-up to that attack and expected result to the arena, and also because the area wasn't as cramped or walled off, leading to Ura going up and down the hills in a frantic pace to crush you until it eventually slows down and stops. Not only that, but it also kind of takes away from how Ratha was supposed to be unique. You know, how he's supposed to be a lighter, faster Uragaan, one who's able to turn and stop in place and U-turn and do tricks that Uragaan could not. It kind of just takes away the uniqueness and feel of Ratha when Ura just practically does the same thing. Again, I understand why he's here, especially considering Ratha's presence in World, but that doesn't make it any less of a disappointment when my boy Laggy didn't make it in. Some other day, old friend. What can I say? It's Lavasioth. Same old Lavasioth that we all know, capable of flopping around, hip checking, you know the drill. Though in this case, I am a bit salty due to the fact that Lavasioth basically steals Ignactor's entire gameplay mechanic. And poorly, might I add. You see, Ignactor was a monster based and designed entirely around the armor mechanic. Even if he wasn't near a source of lava to stand in, the lava beams he produced heated his chest and head, allowing for you to strike it. Plus, many more tactics and attacks like his head thrust, drilling, and even using fire weapons and bombs all provided ways for the armor to be heated up and to be attacked. Even if most of his body was armored, there was always another way. Lavasioth, on the other hand, had the mechanic literally slapped onto him without any thought about how the fight would have to be changed. Now, there isn't a lot you can do to heat up his armor besides his occasional swimming in lava and using fire pods. Which, let me say that even if that is a way to deal with it, that doesn't mean you would have it always on you in the hunt. Because, well, they're pod-related items, they're in the environment, or they're just dropped by sheer random luck. It's not like you'll always have them on you. Much less if Lavasioth will even start in the same area as you. The swimming also literally happens if he is in his starting area, and very rarely in any other spot. Only other ways are either just through him going through the ground, or just sticking to a pit in the lava spout arena. Not to mention, the heated parts cool off at an outrageous rate of about 30 seconds or so, leaving you bouncing off most parts pretty quickly. Sure, his lava spit heats up the head, but not every weapon is going to be able to hit it. Compare this again to Ignactor, whose body was close and connected to the ground, meaning that if your weapon wasn't able to hit the head that was still relatively low, you could still hit the chest due to the fact that it was also heated in the beam attack. So, let me get this straight. You bring back a meh to bad monster, instead of Ignactor, the obvious and clear better choice, and decide to just copy and paste Ignactor's gimmick onto Lavasioth without accommodating for the changes necessary. As a result of him being a lazy monster and stealing the mechanics of a better monster, he shall be condemned to the bottom tier. Before Worlds, I never would have thought that any monster could beat or rival the fear, shock, and panic that Deviljho caused. I mean, its name is infamous among the community for a reason. That is, until Bazel crashed into the scene. Just the simple fact that, leaks aside, nobody, not even Capcom, teased or hinted at this monster's existence before the game came out led to a massive surprise for many people, myself included, and dear lord did he make one hell of an impact. Entire videos are dedicated to the trolling, fun ruining, party crashing attitude of Bazel, as well as his very obvious allusions to bombings in the past and being a literal B-52. The screams and shouts of people first encountering Bazel ring in my head even to this day, and it is absolute music to my ears. That theme, that damn theme! As soon as you hear it, you know you are in for one rude awakening, let alone if you even hear that before he crashes into you. And it doesn't help the fact that Bazel also has the equivalent of the Predator with its roar, just so cool! How it attacks, the way it fights, and strategy for handling it is unlike any other monster in the series, and those bombs it lays down are dangerous if you aren't aware of them and what's coming next. Even if the bombs don't immediately one-shot you, it will still take a major chunk of health from your player, which is... whew. It's terrifying trying to fight him, as one slip-up could easily lead to major trouble. Yet, at the same time, it is just so satisfying to give this thorn in your sides, a monster who's been tormenting you since you entered high rank, his comeuppance, breaking his parts, tripping him up, and halting the production of scale bombs. And his gear. It's so good. There's a reason I farmed him early on in high rank despite the fact that I wasn't supposed to. And it was all for that gear and its delicious skills. In my mind, I believe Bazel has not only reached a rivalry with Joe, but has outright surpassed him in many regards. And all the factors I listed, plus several more, perfectly encapsulates why even now, the Bazel strikes fear into the hearts of many people, as well as striking gold in terms of monster memehood. What a way to introduce DLC in World, by having Deviljho, one of the most iconic monsters within the franchise, as the first batch. Genius right there. And oh boy, has he received quite a few tweaks while in his downtime. For one, he has a few new attacks to try and pummel you with, as well as some variations on already established ones. So, if you're expecting the locomotive train to just end on the third swing, well then, you're in for a rude awakening. Another new thing is this tug-of-war mechanic, as I like to call it, in which if you attack him while he's attacking, he will counterattack back. And then if you counterattack him back, you will receive one of the coolest shots in the game, where he stumbles and trips over himself. And let me tell you, it is one of the most satisfying things to get on Joe, especially when you don't expect it. You wanna know what's also nice? Having Joe just stroll into the area with a wild monster in his mouth, or just picking one up in the middle of the hunt. That shit is terrifying, especially when he starts throwing it all around the place to use as a bat against you. And the moment a Bazel comes near Joe and it says, "Turf War" on the side, well, best to just let them fight. Some negatives I do have to say, however, is that, whilst expected, Joe is quite a tank in this game. So killing him, especially doing it solo, can take a while. Not to mention, the fact that he was released as DLC at a point when mostly everybody had already been Xeno kinda destroyed any fear or surprise factor from previous games when Joe normally appears, as well as its, I will admit, challenge. Granted, it's not enough to make Joe an easy monster, and the feigned fear factor may just be because he's been around since Try, but oh well. He's still a very solid monster, don't get me wrong, and one that deserves its recognition and fear within the community. Now then, we shall hunt it down in the name of our Lord and Savior! I honestly don't think there's much more that needs to be said about this entry that I haven't already discussed in this video right here. If you haven't watched that video and want a more in-depth look at this thing and its flaws, then check it out, because I'll just be summarizing it short and sweet in this segment. You good now? Anyways, Zorah Magdaros, aka Cannon Ballista Simulator 2018. Load up those cannons, fire, maybe aim once in a while, rinse and repeat. All the while, Zorah barely makes any effort to have maybe even a little sense of urgency and just slowly trudges up to you and rarely attacks. And if he does attack? Ooh, look! How scary! A whole pixel worth of damage to the barrier. Even on his back, it doesn't get any better, with the chance of death extremely low due to how long it takes for the core to build up and how little damage it does. The rest of the time, you are just mining and climbing all over the damn thing. But the worst part that I absolutely cannot forgive about this battle is how it fucks over build-up and story integration into the battle, especially with Nergigante. Just look at this shit. No effort or thought whatsoever, just sitting back, mining, and then letting Nurg leave to move on with the mission. Well, so much for this large, imposing Eater of Elders that are dealing with apparently and supposedly affects the operation and its success. I legit cannot believe that this was overlooked by the team and given the go-ahead. A monster that has absolutely no threat factor whatsoever, wastes its story potential and build-up, is depressingly boring and slow, and drains all my will to live like a Metroid on top of Samus Aran. Just let it sink in that it took till AT to fix and make Zorah the slightest bit closer to resemblance of a good boss battle. That is just sad. To end off on a positive note, however, Zorah, at least you aren't as boring or bad as Lao. Fuck this thing, fuck it. This salt may be coming from the fact that I have a stupid idea to try and do a no armor run on its temper version. And you know what? Sure, I'll give the people the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that portion of assault. But everything else is genuine. Kirin and World was the first time I ever failed a quest, and let me tell you that I did not enjoy it. Not a single bit. Somehow, the developers were able to make Kirin even worse in this game by giving it all new attacks, movements, and ruthlessness when it comes to making sure every single hunter in the vicinity is dead. Oh, and let's talk about that lightning for a sec. The only location you can fight Kirin in is the Coral Highlands, and that is a major problem for a single factor. The color of the lightning. It is light blue among a mostly light-colored area with a lot of white, and thus, even if you have good eyesight or think you do, there is a very high likelihood that the lightning can and will blend so well into the environment or even just clip through the ground and become invisible that it is impossible to see. You never saw it coming, you poor, poor thing! I mean, never mind the fact that this is lightning we are talking about. An element within gaming and real life that requires very quick reaction times if you don't want to get fried. Then comes the small size of this thing and how infuriating it can be to hit the damn thing. It will move around so much that you can barely even land a two-hit attack if you are lucky enough before it decides to go for another pacer test jog. Doesn't help that to add on top of that, Kirin gains in armor mode when enraged, which is absolutely impervious to any kind of sharpness unless you have Mind's Eye. Oh yeah, never mind the fact that it's already tough enough to hit as is, and how the only spot that doesn't remain armored throughout the entire fight is that tiny ass head of it. So yeah, good luck, chump. And let me remind ourselves, but this is all without considering the absurd difficulty jumps when it comes to Tempered Kirin and Arch-Tempered. My Little Pony, friendship is madness. Before Worlds, I never really liked Teostra all that much. I liked the design and concept behind it, but the fight with it was always frustrating due to the insta-charge, always on your ass, aggressive nature of the bugger, and the fact that its supernova, practically a one-hit KO move, was on a timer that basically required you to memorize it or use a tool outside of the game in order to know when it would go off was, to me at least, quite frankly bullshit. But in Worlds, I actually found myself enjoying him quite a bit. A lot of people like to throw around how Teo in World had been nerfed or how he wasn't as difficult as he used to and therefore sucked. Good old elitists. Quite frankly, I found myself enjoying the new Teo AI and how a lot of the problems beforehand was removed. Its supernova was no longer a one-shot and can actually be flashed out of. He doesn't insta-charge anymore, and there are actual pockets of space wherein you can tell where the explosions of blast will occur. It still felt like a monster I could screw up on, but it was put on a balanced playing field to where just as I can do a lot to him, so too can he. It feels like with him we finally moved on from the days of Freeman Knight hitboxes, insta-charges, fake difficulty, all the more. And I appreciate the series for taking a major step forward that the 3rd and 4th generation already contribute to. The less we hear about that portion of the fanbase, the better. So yeah, World TO is A-OK in my book. Out of all the monsters on this list, aside from 2 others we will get to later, Lunastra was easily one of the toughest to rank, and certainly an apprehensive one at that. Some old-time fans may remember my less than stellar initial reactions to this monster, from the video in which I first fought it, to the livestream that following day. I've always felt at odds with her in the fight, not exactly liking many of the things that on the surface appear to be unfair. And when it came time to do this video, I knew that while I wanted to make her go to the bottom of the list because of my initial reactions, that it wouldn't exactly be fair. Things change with time. We gain new perspectives and stances on things, and I thought it would only be natural to look at her once again before this video, as well as do some research and have some help given to me. It took a little bit to get to, but eventually, I came to the conclusion that Lunastra is in fact good, if flawed. If there is one thing I can absolutely commend the team for in terms of Lunastra is making her completely distinct from Tio. Gone are the days where she was simply just a blue female counterpart to Teostra, and instead we are given a monster so overhauled and revamped it may as well be something entirely new. The change in focus with her attacks, how she fights, all that and more make it admirable that this much effort was put into a monster like her. Hell, they went so far with her that they made her own separate theme from Tio. Just wow. As a whole, Lunastra is very technical, requiring a different mindset than that of Tio when fighting. Her oil is obviously the most important factor to deal with, as if not tended to or if she is allowed to stay near them, they can alight and become active threats on the field. Ones that can not only emit heat damage, but also react to gusts of wind and attacks from anything, pushing the flames in any direction and most likely hitting you. In a claustrophobic area, it can especially become dangerous, though there are luckily some ways to tend to it. Anything involving water, from your weapon attacks and puddle pods, can put them out before they spark into big flames, with crystal bursts also working just as well. Her empowering charge is weird at first and may seem odd with how it works, but once you realize that the key to it is to not be an idiot and hit her head, prompting her to counter, it is easy to deal with. The hardest thing about Luna, however, and what unfortunately still keeps her dragged down for me, is her supernova. This attack is infamous among world players for how powerful it is, and how easily it can cart and perhaps even wipe an entire team. It is very tricky to dodge, and comes in the form of two waves, each part scattering oils, flames, as well as high-pressure wind to try and keep you stunned, before the second heat wave comes, igniting everything and depleting your health bar faster than you can say easy bake oven. The attack reaches across a wide area, perhaps even covering an entire area depending on its size and the position in which she initiates the flare, meaning that practically nobody is safe. There are a few things that can be done. You can try and take it out with a variety of items to maximize health recovery as well as ward off damage. You can take the easy way out and Farcast her, in which case, I don't blame you. Or you could try and escape from the zone. Despite those methods, however, the flare is still incredibly hard to live through and requires large amounts of skill and even luck, dare I say, to survive. Again, certain strategies and movements can work, and I found that the Insect Glaive's pole vault and subsequent flying can be a great tool to fly over any flame or gust below you and get far enough away. But it is still an incredibly hard attack that will more likely than not result in some frustration. Even disregarding the flare, the oils can become quite a nuisance when considering if A, there are no crystal bursts, puddle pods, or whatever nearby or on hand, or B, if nobody has a water weapon, because really, why would anybody go for a most resistant element to face against her? With how long this segment has consisted of her problems, you'd think I'd put her lower. However, I found in my experimentation recently that there can in fact be more good than bad to this monster. Goods that can make the fight quite enjoyable and even challenging. It's just that, like a desert storm, the fight can change quite a bit. In a way, I can commend Lunastra for being a wake-up call to many people thinking the world as a slight breeze. But that still doesn't mean I'll forget how painful that push was. Hey! Who here loves tornadoes? Who here loves tornadoes blocking off and obscuring your vision as well as mobility? Who here loves a monster to spend a good chunk of the time in the air? Who here loves to be constantly pushed around by a wind barrier that surrounds the monster, making the fight drag on for longer than necessary and outright stops you from doing attacks? Because if you like all of the above qualities, then you will surely like this monster right here. And to add on top of all of that, if you order within the next 5 minutes, then you will receive a new version of Daora that completely removes the advantage of poison over him, never minding that was what made the whole Elder Trio so unique, and instead, just make it Elder Seal, which, never mind that it really isn't all that effective compared to poison. Oh sure, it's effective with damage, but what's the point of using poison at all if its purpose in a Kushala hunt was entirely gutted out? Oh, but don't worry, call within the next 1 second and we'll give you a cramped final area that is like a combination of all the world's worst hurricanes, and will make you have a panic attack just from trying to navigate it. Oh wait, there's more! Pre-order the special collector's edition and you will get the AT Kush, a version that completely negates the flashpod counter, forcing you to wait through this unholy slog of an encounter as you can't do anything besides try and mount him, in which even then will be infected. All this and more in the ultimate Elder Annoyance. Vaal Hazak is a bit of a weird one, to be honest. With Chameleos gone from the Elder Trion world, this new monster would have to live up to the legacy left behind by Chameleos, which isn't an easy task, seeing how much of a fan favorite Chameleos is. In some ways, I think Vaal does a good job of being an Elder Dragon, but not feeling like a part of the trio. Effluvium is a unique status that can lend itself to an interesting battle, but it could come off too annoying for some with how often they may have to pop a Nullberry, and how often some could just be hearing the sounds of constant dots. Yes, there are counters and skills to circumvent it, but that's only considering if you have it. It's like Mind's Eye and Kirin. Yeah, you can negate the armor, but that doesn't get rid of the fact that it is a built-in, terrible mechanic of the fight. You have a unique, creepy, horror-brimmed design that makes you instantly stand out and match with the deep-sea themes of both the Vale and the Coral Highlands, so that's good. Its theme is pretty good, and overall seems like a good fight. Then comes the questionable hitboxes on many of his attacks, and you are left questioning everything. If you are so much at the tip of his wings and tail when he is jumping, you will still get hit. Or, how about the tail on that swing attack, where it goes one way and then goes the other. It can also be very annoying if Vaal is in that one moment of the fight and just decides to repeatedly spam his beam attack, especially if you are at the entrance to an area. But what overall hurts Vaal in the trio comparison is that he doesn't really interact with anybody, not even Nergigante or any other Elder. He feels separate from the outside world, as well as all the events that take place within the story and game. And when one of the main selling points of the game is the Turf War system, and you see Tio, Kush, and a new Elder which is presumed to be the replacement of Chameleos, then you would have assumed that the trio connections is established further via the Turf Wars. They kind of do it for Kush and Tio, but not for Vaal. Look, I like quite a bit about this monster, such as its armor, some of the weapons, because some are just weapon reskins for some reason, design, theme, and how it basically is the Grim Reaper. Hell, its fight isn't even awful for me like Kirin or Kush. But I just can't ignore some of the missed opportunities and annoyances of the fight, so I guess this rank will have to do for now. In terms of just fight alone, I absolutely love Nergigante. Everything about it feels like what I desire from fights like these. Fast-paced, intense, blood-pumping, challenging, and most importantly, fun. He has so many attacks and moves that will leave you in the dirt if you can't respond properly. Plus, due to his spikes and regeneration, it can become quite the trouble trying to break them and not bounce off of him. And just all the more harder to even defeat him. Yet, everything he offers up to the table can also be countered by you. You can break his spikes and trip him up. You can be just as aggressive and bloodthirsty as he is. And you can exploit every moment of weakness and hesitation within him. It feels like a hunter personified as a single monster. And it is awesome. And in many ways, it reminds me quite a bit of Rajane, but honestly, better. Rajane is supposed to be this embodiment of a brute, rage incarnate, you know, probably close quarters focused. Yet for some odd reason, the developers decided to give him ranged options. He is fast and relentless, but it's not in a way that feels fair and balanced. For as soon as he's done with an attack and pauses for like 2 seconds, he starts moving and attacking yet again, or worse, backstepping. The only real good way to deal with him is to trip cheese him, usually with great swords, and that presents a whole lot of issues when it comes to balancing, and certainly says how the first and second gens view difficulty. Nergigante, on the other hand, does all that and more while remaining a fun fight above all else. Originally, I was going to put Nerg at a 9 out of 10, but then 18 Nerg came out and just further cemented everything I love about Nerg and more. That monster easily takes the crown of hardest battle in the entire game. But unlike Kirin or other monsters where failure would result in pain and frustration of how bullshit that was, I continued to learn more and more on how he works, getting better and better. I know the Pepega Slam, as some call it, has grown a nasty reputation around the community because of certain people, but it really does have a fairly generous hitbox to it despite its really fast startup. It is totally and realistically possible to learn how to avoid it and ultimately be safe. And if anything, I found that it was a sort of subtle stab at the AED-defined meta of Charge Blade, a way of letting people know that that strategy wouldn't work here. 18 Nerg truly did live up to the expectations that was set up by the developers, and all the while, as I'm finding it and writing this section out, I'm reminded of Beta Nergigante and the challenge it gave me. The path to victory is never without pain. It is just merely a question of whether you are capable of standing up to the pain and triumphing through. It is a principle heavily centered in Monster, and I find that Nergigante is the pinnacle embodiment of this principle. And it is for that reason that Nergigante has risen not just to the very top of this video or near it, but also to the peaks of my favorite elders and monsters of all time. Dead serious, I fucking love Nergigante. Defeating Nerg, both normal and as AT for a first time, is certainly an experience I won't soon forget. In terms of storytelling and symbolism, Xeno'jiiva is one of the best in all of Monster. Maybe not beating out 4 Ultimate's story, but it is definitely able to do so much just within the span of one encounter in an AT. The beginning of the battle depicts the monster's unawareness of its surroundings as well as capabilities. Slow, childlike, and clumsy. It doesn't use anything extra in this portion of battle, just very basic. But as the fight progresses, Xeno begins to tap more and more into the soul energy dwelling within it, releasing laser beams of all sorts and explosions. Then, finally, the creature learns to fly, and seen you as a real threat, retreats to a higher point in its nest, only to be confronted again by you. Yet despite all that it has learned, it still makes many mistakes and ultimately succumbs to its wounds, dying as a result. In summary, for all those expecting something harder or something along Freedom Unite Fatalis levels of difficulty, that wasn't the point of the battle. The point was the sense of the unknown, as well as the mystery of this creature and what it could do. As a result, however, despite my explanation and praising from a storytelling perspective, that also leaves it lacking in certain areas in terms of the actual fight. Visually speaking, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the design, one of the best designs in all of Monster, and the effects and everything in terms of the visual aspect and medium is just fantastic in this battle. I won't deny, however, the slow pace of the battle and the length of it, and in terms of difficulty, it isn't even all that hard, which I can see how that may throw off some players. Despite all that though, it is still fun, and there are definite highlights to the encounter. If you want the true Xeno'jiiva experience, however, then look no further than AT Xeno, which takes everything established with him and ramps it up to 11, and then some. The difficulty? No problem. Here, have no first stage, entire battle takes place in the second stage, all mountain and vertical aspects are removed, make him go Kaioken Blue more often, make him do more damage, add in some new attacks or patterns, and while we're at it, add in some Shigaru bombs with certain attacks. Combine that with the floor heating up much more frequently, and you have yourself a recipe for some tasty Hunter Hot Pockets. So overall, if I had to summarize, Xeno'jiiva is an okay monster and final boss, but a great AT. So then, combining the two together and considering everything for this list, I think a spot near the end of good would be perfect. Honestly, What is there to say about Kulve Taroth that hasn't already been said? In case if it needs reiteration, well, here we go. She is one of the best battles of World, one of the greatest Elder Dragon fights, and is in the top 2 of greatest siege battles in all of Monster. Every aspect of the fight works harmoniously with the monster and player, breaking it up into multiple sections that each need not just damage to be done, but also track finding and gathering. For as more tracks are gathered, and with more parts broken, the reward and progress bar for the hunt will increase further, allowing the players to get farther along the hunt and get even more rewards and items when it all comes to a close. So even in the more boring portions of the hunt, the player is always doing something that furthers the goal of the mission. And when you finally break those juicy horns, you get a nice batch of rewards and relic weapons based on your reward and pursuit level, encouraging the drive to not only get higher scores with Kulve, but to also keep coming back to it over and over again to get what you want. It truly is the epitome of monster and its addictive cycle manifest into one single monster. The fight also provides some nice challenge with it, as Kulve has both firepower and thickness to use against you. Seriously though, I am not joking about that thick comment. Try not to get trampled or firebeamed by her, because it hurts like hell. And it's really funny how fast the fight changes from a slow, methodical, but on the dime, quick and powerful opponent in the first 3 phases, and then just straight up adrenaline pumping in the 4th and final phase. Oh, and don't even get me started on AT Kulve, which cranks up the fight by several notches, adding a brand new Fury mode when conditions are met, as well as new attacks, a terrifyingly haunting Fury theme, and weapons to get from the mode. If you thought she hurt badly before, then just wait for this. Not everything, however, is perfect, and despite my praises for the system and how it functions, I will admit personally that a single Kulve expedition can take quite a long time to even clear. Upwards of 30 minutes and potentially more, especially if you aren't so lucky and can't do it with a full team of 4. Not to mention, her hitboxes, especially when considering her rolls and tail specifically, can be jank at times. When she rolls, even if you are right by the end of it, make sure to Superman dive, just in case, else it will still probably hurt you. It's a shame that there are a couple of bads within this fight, but when considering the previous types of siege monsters and what they offered, yeah, no wonder Kulve is one of the best. Oh boy, this guy. As I said earlier with Lunastra, these next few monsters along with her were the most difficult monsters to rank in this entire list. So many factors play into these few, Behemoth especially, that it is tough to decide a definitive spot. The strategies, attacks, and momentum of the fight is unlike any other monster in the entire series, making it a very unique but difficult monster to approach. I suppose we'll start basic with Behemoth and then build our way up to the verdict like all the others on this list. So, here we go. As mentioned prior, Behemoth requires a radically different method compared to other monsters in order to even approach, requiring the MMO standards of a tank, a healer, and a DPS if you are to be successful. Tanks are to draw aggro from the monster by attacking its head, causing all the attacks that would become nuisances like Charybdis to be focused on one person or stop entirely, allowing others a chance to strike. Healers are self-explanatory, though because any hunter can heal via life powders, it is best for everybody to carry them on hand just in case. Regardless though, you should probably still have a full-on healer, using a good wide-range mix set that I'm sure you could find suggestions on somewhere. And then DPS is, again, explanatory. You are the damage dealers. Heavy coordination and communication is required amongst all members of the party, as there will be many tricks in the Behemoth's arsenal to watch out for, ranging from Charybdis, requiring either a flash pod or someone to go to the edge of the arena to deal with it, or the main do-or-die mechanic that everybody knows of, Ecliptic Meteor. This attack is a guaranteed one-shot spread across every zone in the recess, with no surefire way to survive it regardless of skills or setup, unless if the hunters use the comets that land throughout the fight by Behemoth, and protecting them, or, alternatively, timing the Dragoon jump to go through the attack. There's also going into the camp tent, supposedly, but do you really? It is this factor, along with the survival of the comets and the way you fight Behemoth, that makes it a tricky fight to rank. as the battle is heavily multiplayer based, requiring a good amount of setup and strategy to even fight in the battle. Trying to keep everything progressing all the while keeping the comets alive while also fighting off Charybdis and the variety of attacks he has is a nightmare. There's also the concern of the high damage he has, as well as multiple elements, statuses, and the potential of stunlock or pin city that a hunter can easily suffer from. Trust me, you don't want to suffer in stunlock city. No less in the hands of this guy. This guy is a wombo combo master. There is always the possibility of soloing Behemoth and not doing multiplayer, but soloing this monster is a colossal task, one that would be seen as impossible by many people, surely requiring many long, grueling hours and days to survive through and eventually perfect into a run where you can not only protect comets but also have enough time to survive and kill him. It is still all possible, as shown by the internet, but it is still just extremely difficult. Not to mention, not everybody has access to PlayStation Plus or the internet when playing Worlds, so they're kind of screwed. If you do decide to go on multiplayer like any sensible person would, it is still difficult and requires many hunts, sometimes not even guaranteeing if you'll have the same people due to the nature of online and, well, let's be honest, randoms. To set up an efficient team for Behemoth is painful and long, but if you actually do it, it's fun. That overwhelming feeling of pride and victory over something like this is amazing, making you and your team feel like badasses for pulling it together and doing it. It is cathartic as all hell. However, due to the nature of how Behemoth works, I feel I cannot place Behemoth any higher than good because of the required demands of the fight. It could certainly be good and amazing, don't get me wrong, it just requires a lot of time, patience, time, frustration, time, pain, time, and agony to reach that peak. Leshen is an interesting fight, to say the least. Okay, well, first of all, before even getting to Leshen, I will have to give props to the Monster team for creating such an interesting mission beforehand. The amount of Witcher detail put into it all, from the track finding to the asking and helping of the NPCs, as well as the side quests and optional challenges within it, all lend itself well to a Monster format, and are neatly adapted into the gameplay, letting itself not only challenge and see if you can accomplish everything, but also replay value to see if there's anything you missed out on, like how I never knew of the Pukei side quest when I first played, or how I unfortunately missed out on the Gadalaka side quest because I didn't have all the tools. It sucks, but hey, live and learn. Getting on to the actual fight, however, Leshen is weird. He moves so unlike any other monster, and I don't mean just in terms of his body shape, though that is a factor, but also in terms of his movements and attacks. To hunters who are used to the usual monster attack speeds and patterns, Leshen will throw you off quite a bit with a variety of delayed swings, swipes, root commands, and more. Now, there are tells to each attack, very subtle cool tells might I add, but it may be hard for some people to see due to how small and varied these tells are. Aside from his attacks, Leshen also employs the use of a dreaded Revolture dot barrier, as well as cloning way stronger, more aggressive Jagras than what you're used to. And this is where some more trouble with Leshen will come from, as a good portion of the damage you take in this battle will be from the Revoltures. And Lord Kulu help you if you get cornered or pressured by the Jagras, potentially getting comboed by Leshen's already pretty damaging attacks. But the worst part of this battle by far is the teleporting. You hate it, I hate it, everyone and their mother who has played for this mission hates it. Now granted, there is a mechanic where if you throw slender ammo at him before or after he teleports, he can be stunned for a bit. But for how much of a hassle it is to do that and how often he does teleport, it just really isn't worth it. And he teleports so much! Sometimes you will be running from halfway across the arena to him, only for him to teleport again to the other side of the map you were just at. Sometimes he'll just teleport back into the spot he originally was, just as a way to sneak attack you. Sometimes he teleports around corners or obstacles, making it hard to see or discern where he is. Or sometimes he just takes a while to actually teleport in, and it is always pretty difficult to discern where he'll be until the moment he actually appears on the map, which even then will take some looking at either the map or around you to find. Whatever the case is, it is annoying and causes the fight to drag on for way too long. And don't even get me started on if you decide to do the Pukei side quest and decide to try and keep him alive. It is hell. But hey, at least I get a free attack jewel for all my pain. Is it sad that this is the only other attack tool I've gotten in my 450 plus hours of World? Leshen barely, and I do mean barely, skates away from the realm of bad due to his unique abilities and style of approach, as well as the quest, but it still isn't all that good. Now then. Oh boy. Let us get to that thing. Originally, I didn't think much bad of this monster back when I first fought it in my livestream. Which, side note, and shameless plug, be sure to follow me on Twitch to see whenever I stream at twitch.tv/MonarchofDragons. Anyways, back to your regular scheduled program. But after fighting it again recently and reading over some comments about this guy, fuck him! Ancient Leshen is everything bad about the original bumped up to stratospheric levels of frustration, but without the cool way of doing the quest. For starters, hey! Remember the Dot Revolture Barrier of Doom and how you can make them go away by spamming Igni enough times? Well, tough luck here. Now, that strategy no longer works. All spamming Igni will do is allow about 5 seconds of free damage, all without getting rid of the Revoltures. Fantastic! Remember the decent amount of damage that the original Leshen would do? Well now, almost every attack from him is a one-shot with unmaxed health and still takes up to half and more of your health even with maxed health. And that is all without considering the ludicrous amount of damage you'll be taking from those damn birds. Trust me when I say you won't be spending a majority of the time healing from big powerful attacks like most other monsters. No, you'll be chugging all of your potions from just the birds. Remember the Jagras that would come in? Remember how they were a nuisance if they crowd around you, potentially leaving you to be comboed and pinned by them and Leshen? Well now, you'll have no say on whether you get pinned or not, for Ancient Leshen, like any good sex offender would, picks a target after doing his main call, sending all the Jagras towards that player specifically. Oh, but it isn't a bukkake of pain from just the Jagras, no. For Ancient, being a good old neighbor we know him as, decides to also send a milk-stained present too. A present in the form of roots that lock onto that same player. That can be repeated multiple times if it misses, and if it hits, pins them to that spot to get decimated by the Jagras, plus potentially more, faster than you could say Astral Finish. And if you somehow survive it, which is very unlikely for a multiplayer run unless there is something like a health booster or life powder that is used, or impossible for single player runs, then he ensures there's at least one last surprise jack-in-the-box to come launch you. And of course, still being a Leshen, Ancient has the habit of teleporting all over the damn place, with it actually being even worse due to the multiplayer. What really cements this battle in the absolutely awful tier is how fake the difficulty for this monster feels. No matter how well you perform, you'll be taking damage no matter what from the Revoltures, having to heal constantly from them, all the while being under constant pressure that one little nudge by his claws or roots will be enough to send you into your local mental asylum. I swear, this is like the second coming of AT Vaal. And I'm sorry, but the mechanics for the fight with the Jagras posse is just dumb. An attack where one fuck-up, one slip-up by anybody, whether it be with dealing with the Jagras, getting the person out of the roots, making sure the person survives the root, or even just outright avoids it, results in an instant cart is just bullshit. This is especially so in solo, as the entire course of the battle is literally decided by this attack, with potentially 30 plus minutes all going down the drain just because of an attack that requires perfection out of the player. Now, I know there will be some people saying something along the lines of how this should also probably apply to Behemoth and Extremoth, especially considering how the Ecliptic Meteor can be a guaranteed party wipe if people don't find a rock or Dragoon jump, or how I should rank Extremoth lower due to my initial reactions to it. Well, A, there is a pattern to whenever the Ecliptic Meteors occur, always at the end of a phase with normal Behemoth, and with Extremoth, third phase being a DPS test, and fourth phase having rapid fire Ecliptics in a row as you approach the end and deal more damage, having to do enough to continue. B, there isn't just one method for a meteor. There is more than one chance you get depending on the number of comets you are able to keep alive, as well as the Dragoon jump if you need to. And C, as if the entire rest of this video hasn't been enough of a hint, opinions and perspectives change with time. If I were to do Extremoth now, I would still most likely struggle, but I would have adapted and learned how to properly do the fight. What I'm trying to get at with Behemoth and Extremoth is that you still have a chance to fight back and escape. They are execution heavy, but still possible. With Ancient Leshen on the other hand, nope, have to rely on the help of others or maybe some foresight of planting a health booster, which can barely outspeed the damage of everything else, and if you can't or are doing it solo, tough luck, die! And as one final confirmation as to why Ancient Lesson is worse and deserves specifically to be here, let me ask, was Behemoth or Extremith ever the subject of a nerf specifically on them? Yeah, I didn't think so. You know you fucked up when even the developers have to tone down the bullshit of a monster through a nerf, yet even with it, the monster still remains painful and teleports all the damn time. But with all that said, let us move on to the conclusion of this long video. I apologize about how long this video, or these series of videos, have been. Trust me, even in the scripting phase, it was absolutely painful, and normally I wouldn't like to make such a long video, or even split a video up into multiple parts like this, but unfortunately, I think it's necessary for something like this. Overall, what I'm trying to get at is that World's roster has its good. It definitely has a lot of good. When a monster in World is great, it is great. It is fantastic even. And there is so much fun to be had with World and its gameplay and the monsters. Everything about it, in terms of gameplay perspective, great. But when monsters in World suck, for however many reasons there will be, they suck hard. And it's through this entire video and the points I have made that I hope Iceborne continues to make better and better monsters, and even perhaps fix monsters that I may have had a problem with. Like, for instance, I don't like Anjanath, but Vulgar Anjanath looks like a step in the right direction, a version of the monster I may actually like, and one that may seem fun. Hell, even the dumb little feature like the sails and the nose are much more bearable now that they kind of have a gameplay function in terms of charging up the monster. You know, it's that kind of thing they have to remain hopeful for, that even if you have some shitty monsters in a base version or whatever of Monster, that hopefully things will get better. And I am looking forward immensely to Iceborne, and I hope that this video does a nice enough job to get a perspective on my feelings for World and its monsters. And with all that said, I want to know what your guys' opinions on Monster Hunter World's roster is. What monsters did you think were good, and what did you think were bad? What monsters did you like, and what monsters did you not like? Did you agree or disagree with some of my opinions and viewpoints? If so, that's completely fine, you know? That's just what happens. It's life. Not everyone's gonna think or have the same opinions. That's kind of boring if it was that way. But as always, feel free to leave your comments and debates and conversations in the comment section below. I always love seeing people talk it out and talk about their opinions in a respectful manner, and I love talking with you guys and understanding all of the small, intricate opinions that everyone has. With all that said, however, I thank you all for watching. I have been the Monarch of Dragons, and I hope you all have a fantastic day / night wherever you live. Peace. Kulus Volt!